Hey everyone, welcome back. It has been quite some time since the last video, and maybe some of you were probably worried I wasn't going to finish this, but here we are. We're back for the third part. We are working our way through scenario 2, birthday present, and we left off in the last video right at the end of the combat phase in turn 6. So we saw the Japanese Squadron A. They broke after their combat, and with them goes the biggest threat that the Japanese have to counter the Chinese interceptors. The Chinese have lost their P-40E flight. It broke early, only after one combat. And now we have the veteran P-40B squadron. It has already been through 2 combats and is now at depleted ammo, but it is still in the fight, undisrupted. And there also is this green P-40B squadron, flight, that well, actually, we didn't resolve its combat yet. We got up to that point, and then we ended right at after this combat. So we still have to resolve this combat. I forgot. So good thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and resolve this combat to conclude the combat phase. All right, so we have the P-40B against the Ki-21 bombers. So let's get these cards up here. All right, the P-40B. We have a choice of attacking with speed or with turn ratings, and we are here at altitude 11. So we are using this top band for the P-40Bs. So turning, as mentioned earlier, is never a good idea. It's rarely a good idea against bombers, because bombers get a +2 to their defense rating. So the Chinese will choose to go with a speed rating of 4. They are a flight, so that speed will drop from a 4 down to a 3. And they are also green, so that will drop further down to a 2. The Ki-21s, they have a speed at this altitude of 3, and with their bomb load attached, that speed drops down to a 2. So we are looking at the 0 column for both of their combat rolls. So let's go ahead and resolve these. We'll start with the Chinese player. We'll roll for them on the 0 column. Okay, we got a 5 over here and a 3 over here. That's an 8. An 8 on the 0 column is 1 hit. If we look at the modifiers, nothing here influences the combat. So we have 1 hit. We're going to go ahead and resolve that hit on the losses chart. So we're going to roll 1d6 and add the firepower of the P-40. See if they can down a Japanese bomber. Okay, they roll a 2 plus 1 for the firepower is a 3. And that is less than the protection rating of the bombers, so no effect from that hit. Now we need to roll for the Japanese and their combat roll on the 0 column. Ooh, and they roll a 10. A 10. They have no modifiers. A 10 on the 0 column is 2 hits. So we're going to resolve 2 hits with their firepower rating of 0. And they need to roll a 3 or a 4 to do any damage. So here goes the first one. That is a 5. That is a loss. And then we'll roll for the second one. It's a 1. No effect. So the bombers managed to shoot down one of the attacking P-40s, and we'll stick that on their wing display. Alright, now comes down to, was the combat worth it? Because if the P-40s can disrupt the bombers as a result of this combat in this cohesion check, then it was totally worth the 1 loss of a P-40. So let's go ahead and roll for cohesion. We'll roll for the P-40s first. Roll their cohesion check. Alright, they're a 7. They get +1 because they are the attacking side, but -1 because they're green. And then -1 for their loss that they just received. So it's a -2 and a +1. So that's going to be a net of 6, which is 1 level of disruption. And that will break them because they are only a flight. They are only a flight. So we'll go ahead and take away their mission marker. They have broken. Replace it with a broken marker. And again, we could mark them with a low ammo marker, but there's no point now because they will roll no more cohesion checks. They're already broken. Alright, so let's see if the bombers, how they handled that combat. Let's roll for the bomber cohesion. And that's a 7. And it's much harder to cause cohesion hits on bombers. They have to get a 4 or less to get any disruption. So they pass, no modifiers. That wasn't so good. That wasn't so good for the interceptors. Okay, now we're at the conclusion of combat. We don't do a dogfight check. There are no unbroken fighters from both sides. And so now we move from the combat phase to the administration phase. Now, at this point, we have 2 broken units on the map. We have this B flight and we have this A Japanese squadron. Now, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and remove them, let them escape, because they're not really going to be a part of the ongoing combat. The Japanese interceptors do not want to target broken fighters while there are unbroken fighters still in the fight. So this guy is going to come off now. There's no point in keeping him on. Put him back on his wing display. And then we'll go ahead and let the Japanese squadron escape as well, simply because these guys need to continually harass the bombers, not go after broken fighters. There may be situations in other scenarios where it's in the best interest to pursue the broken fighters, maybe to get to harvest some extra victory points, but not right now. Not at this point. Alright, so we're at the administration phase. There's nothing else really to do at this point. So let's go ahead and advance to turn number 7. I just dropped my turn marker. Go pick that up real quick. Turn 7 now. Okay. So new turn. Nothing to set up. Go to the tally phase. Raiders tally first. We still have this flight of fighters for the Japanese that have not yet sighted the enemy. So they are going to try to tally the A squadron below them. So they need to roll higher than a 2 to succeed the tally roll. So here goes their roll. Okay, they succeeded. They succeeded. So let's go ahead and put their tally on Squadron A. And then for the Chinese player, they will not change their tally. They want to stay 1, they want to keep harassing the bombers, and 2, they want to maintain their status as the attacker in each combat. If he was to switch his tally, well, actually he can because he's in a square with an unbroken enemy flight, so he couldn't tally anything outside his square. But even if he could, if he placed his tally up here on D, then D would become the combat if they ended up in the same square. Since he is at a higher elevation, he will move second, and that determines who's the attacker. But whenever a bomber is involved in the combat, the bomber side is always the defender. All right, so no tally change for the Chinese. Let's go to the movement phase. So let's move this bomber forward 2. We're nearing the end of the map, so the Chinese player does not have a lot of time. Oops, I just moved the Chinese. I just moved the P-40s. Let's move the bombers first. Oh, I'm sorry. With D tallying successfully, they switch to alert status, and well, they're still a sweep mission, so that's correct. All right, so bombers move 2 spaces. This triggers A's movement. He has a tally on W, so he is going to pursue. This triggers D's movement because he's got a tally on A, so he is going to pitch down and dive into the action. So we'll mark him with a dive marker. And then last to move is this bomber. Alright, now we're in the combat phase. So, here's what we have. We have the P-40s, the veteran P-40s, attacking, and they will go ahead and use their speed. They have a speed of 4, +1 because they're veteran. So we'll put that there. So they are a speed of 5, modified up to a 5. And the Japanese get to choose who their primary combatant is. They can do the bombers or the fighters. They choose the fighters as they have the better ratings. So their speed at this altitude is a 3. -1 because it's a flight, down to a 2. +1 because they're diving, back up to a 3. So, yeah, that's what we have. Now, just for curiosity's sake, if we had chosen the bombers as the primary combatant, they have a speed of 3, -1 because they're carrying bombs, but then +1 because they have a supporting flight in the combat. So right here you see for each additional fighter, squadron, or flight, there's a +1. So we have the same odds. 3 -1 for bombs, +1 for the supporting fighters. It's a 3 if the sallies are chosen. It's a 3 if the fighters are the primary combatants. So it really doesn't matter at this point since they have the same firepower rating. Let's just go with the fighters. Okay, so the Chinese will roll on the +2 column. The Japanese will roll on the -2 column. Okay, so here we go. Here goes the Chinese roll, +2 column. Ooh, that is a good roll. 11, no modifiers here, so on the +2 column, 11 is 3 hits. Okay, he is going to have to assign those hits as equally as possible to both combatants. So since the bombers are the more juicy target, he's going to assign 2 hits to the bombers and 1 hit to the fighters. He can't assign all of them to the bombers. He has to split them up as best he can, or as equally as he can. So let's roll for the 2 hits on the bombers first. He's going to apply his firepower rating of 1 to these rolls. So there's a 1, that's an automatic miss. That's a 3, +1 goes to a 4, and that matches one of the protection ratings of the bombers, so that is going to be a straggler. Now, W squadron already had a straggler, so that converts it to another loss, a 3rd loss for W. Okay, that's good. That's 2 more victory points for the Chinese. And now let's roll the 1 hit on the fighters. That is a 5 +1. That's definitely higher than their protection rating, so that's a loss. There's a loss on the fighters. Okay, so a bomber and a fighter were shot down. Let's go ahead and roll for the Japanese combat on the -2 column. roll a 5, and they have no modifiers to this roll, so that is going to be no hits. Okay, cohesion. Let's go ahead and roll for the Chinese attackers first. Let's do their cohesion roll. That's an 8 plus 1 because they are the attacker. They're the attacker, plus 1 because they're veteran. And they have a -2 ammo marker, so -2 for that. So +2, -2. They continue to avoid disruption. And since they already are at depleted ammo, that ammo marker does not increase anymore, so there's no further negatives for them in future combats. Okay, now we have to roll. Let's roll for the bomber cohesion. See if we can break them. They're already disrupted. Oh, and I should have mentioned that if I had chosen the Sally as the primary combatant, they would have gotten a -1 for the disruption that they have. So it was better off to go with these guys for the combat as the primary combatant. I knew I was missing something. Okay. Bomber cohesion. Here we go. Ooh, and that is a 9. They have 3 losses, so it drops down to a 6. Still no disruption for them. Let's roll for the fighters. Let's see if they break. That's a 9. -1 for 1 loss is 8. They do not break. They survive that, and they get a -1 ammo marker. Okay. Now we can do a dogfight check because both of these guys are still unbroken. It is in the Japanese player's best interest to do a dogfight. 1, because it keeps the Chinese away from the bombers, and it locks them into a combat with the fighters. But 2, the Japanese turn rating is much better than the P40, so to force a dogfight would use the turn rating all the time, and that is not what the Chinese player wants. So since the Chinese player does not want a dogfight and the Japanese player does want a dogfight, we're going to have to roll 1 dice for each side, and we're going to add their speed rating and any veteran markers they may have. So let's roll for the Japanese player first. That's a 6. Oh dear. And let's roll for the Chinese. That's also a 6. Okay, so we add the speed rating to both of these. The basic speed, so it's going to include any dive or climb markers they may have. So their speed is a 3, and their diving marked with a dive marker, so that's +4 to this. That goes up to a 10. The Chinese player has a speed of 4. They are not diving, so that goes up to a 10 as well, but they are veteran, which bumps them up to 11. So they are 1 higher. Their modified roll is 1 higher than the Japanese fighters, so they avoid a dogfight. So, no dogfight. Alright, so that's the end of the combat phase. Let's go ahead and move on to the admin phase. There's nothing to do there, so we advance the turn marker. It's turn 8. Let's go ahead and do tally phase. Tallies are going to stay the same. The Japanese wants to keep their tally on the Chinese. Chinese want to keep their tally on the bombers. So let's go to the movement phase. Let's kind of break these guys out a bit. We'll have the bombers move first. That triggers their movement. They're going to follow. And then these guys are likewise going to follow. And since he's not going to be diving or climbing this turn, his dive marker comes off, and he flies 1, 2, and then this bomber follows up the rear. Okay, next combat phase. Same old, same old. Chinese are the attacker. They have a speed of 4, +1 because they're veteran, so it's a 5. And they're going to use the fighters as their primary combatant. They're a speed of 3. And no dive marker, so it's just a 3. So again, it's a +2, -2 roll. Alright, so let's roll for the P40s. Oh, you know what? I forgot. On the last cohesion roll, these KI-43s should have gotten a -1 for no radio, because they have no radio per the scenario instructions. But again, I think it was an 8 was their cohesion roll. Is that right? Oh man, now I can't remember. Oh, it was pretty high, but they would have gotten -1 for their loss marker and then -1 for the no radio. I don't want to go through the trouble of going back and trying to figure it out. So let's just say that the Japanese fighters did not break. We'll say they rolled a 12. they rolled a 9, -1 for ammo, -1. I'm sorry, -1 for loss, -1 for radio was 7. We'll say that was the roll. Okay, just for ease, and also for good. It's just a good demonstration. We wanted to see a dogfight forced on the Chinese, or attempted to be forced on them. Okay, so combat rolls. Let's roll for them a +2 on the combat table. That's an 8, no modifiers. That is going to be 2 hits. So let's roll 1 hit for the bombers, 1 hit on the fighters. Let's roll for the bomber hit. Ooh, that's a 6. It's an automatic loss. So let's put a loss marker on wing display, and then a loss. Let's roll for the loss on the Japanese fighters. That's also a loss. Okay, so 2 kills for the Chinese. This squadron is doing very well. They have shot down all the aircraft in this game, which is 4 bombers and 2 fighters. So that P-40 squadron is doing quite well for themselves. Let's roll for the Japanese on the -2 column. That's a 6. 6 on the -2 is no hits. Now cohesion. Let's roll for the P-40s. Alright, that's a 7. 7 +1 because they're the attacker, +1 because they're veteran, -2 for their ammo, so they still are not broken. That is quite amazing. This does not happen very often. Let's roll for the bomber cohesion. Okay, that's a 9. -4 losses takes them down to a 5. So they still pass. They still pass their cohesion check because they needed a 4 to cause another level of disruption. And let's roll for the Japanese fighters, their cohesion. Alright, this is going to break them. 5, 6, 7, 8. -2 losses, -1 ammo, -1 no radio. That's at least 1 level of disruption, and since they're a flight, they automatically break. So we're going to take off their tally marker and replace their mission marker with a broken. And then we can go ahead and just remove them at this point, because during the admin phase they will leave. Okay, next turn. Alright, so now we're in a situation here. The P-40Bs, if they maintain their tally on W, W will fly off the map and he can't attack anyone. So X would end up right here, which would theoretically allow another combat against him, but A cannot tally him this tally phase because he is in the same square with an unbroken squadron. So his tallies can only be directed at what's in his square. So if he waited until next turn to tally X, X is going to fly off. So that's pretty much the end of the scenario right here. There's nothing the P-40s can do to influence what goes on. So let's go ahead and end the scenario by counting up victory points and seeing who won. So we look down here at our victory conditions. So we total each side's victory points, subtract the Chinese from the Japanese victory points to see who wins. Okay. Each Japanese bomber shot down is 2 victory points, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8. And then 1 victory point for each Japanese fighter, 9, 10. So 10 victory points for the Chinese. And then we count up the Japanese victory points. They have 1, 2 P-40s shot down. Each one of them is worth 1 victory point, so that's 2 victory points. They get 6 victory points for an unbroken bomber squadron exiting the map, and they get 3 points for a disrupted bomber squadron exiting the map. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 2 is 11. So the Japanese had 11 victory points, the Chinese had 10 victory points. So you subtract 10 from 11, you get a net +1 victory point in the Japanese favor, and that will be an easy Chinese victory. So there you have it. The bombers were pretty sturdy and did not break, but they did lose 4 bombers, and that's all that the Chinese really needed to ensure success. So the most valuable player in this scenario was definitely this squadron, this veteran squadron of P-40Bs, as they shot down 6 aircraft. But that is how it plays out. So, hope you guys learned some things and maybe enjoyed watching this playthrough. The next scenario we'll take a look at will be Stalingrad Airlift, and this one introduces escort, the escort mission type. So we'll get to explore some more of the rules as we get to that, but we'll go ahead and end the episode here. And thanks for watching. Post any questions or comments you may have, and I'll try to answer those in the next video. Also, if you have any suggestions for video content, if you want an episode dedicated to, say, rule changes or rule differences between the first and second edition, or if you want an episode dedicated to wing formations or advanced tally or movement examples, just post those in the comments section and I will try to address those in future videos. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.